Let's go now. A little life out here. What the hell's going on out here? Hey, what about that now?
Hello everybody, welcome to the UK Packers podcast. As usual, I'm your host at SteeDDNFL on Twitter, and of course follow the group at UK Packers. And can you believe it? It's time for quick snaps. Oh, quick snap, pause for the obby. This is a big moment for us. You know, this is the first quick snaps of the season, which is a shame because it's for preseason, right? But anyway, it's quick and snappy. It's going to be even more quick and snappy because it's preseason. So we're not going to go into what we expect to see, but it is different. It's kind of like at the end of the season when, and this doesn't happen to the Packers all that often lately anyway, that there's not a lot to play for. You're kind of locked into position. You put out your second, third, fourth, fifth stringers or whoever's healthy, probably at that stage, the kit man to go out and play DB. So that's what we're looking for here. But again, it's not all created equal, right? Some positions are going to get a run out more in earnest, whereas other ones are going to be rested. And that's obvious. But there are some players within those groups that sort of come into play. Now, if you're looking to where you can watch it and you don't want to pay the DAZN price because, if you have paid it, you'll know about it now because your bank manager called you up and asked you, do you want to remortgage the house? So if you haven't done that, if you have a DAZN account, apparently, and we'll all find out, it is free to watch on DAZN if you have an account. And the way they're selling it is kind of like a teaser. You can see what you're in for with the NFL season, with preseason. Not a great selling point. So if you're watching the Packers for the first time on preseason, we promise it's not like this all the time. At least, not unless one of our main starters goes down and you have some of the sort of secondary guys in there. Then you get that level of play. So there's a couple of things to look out for in this game. Some of them are really obvious, some of them are not. So let's just sort of do a bird's eye view. Let's pull right back away from players and individual battles and all that kind of stuff. So what are the coaches looking for? And that's the most important thing here. This is said as a trope all the time, and I feel like I'm kind of repeating myself, where you type in preseason and this is the first thing that comes up. This notion of a simplified defense, a simplified offense, that sounds like the coaches don't care. They just throw you out there and go do whatever. Or it's really vanilla because they don't want to expose your exotic packages. It's not so much that. They're installing stuff behind the scenes in training camp, and all they really want to get out of this from a coaching perspective. And there's a coach's agreement in some of these games. So with the Packers, they're in Pittsburgh. They're practicing with Mick McCarthy. And I'm sure LaFleur and McCarthy come together and say, listen, during this game, don't do this, that and the other. And you don't do this, that and the other. And anyone who goes, that's absolute nonsense. It does happen. There's anecdotal evidence out there and stories about coaches that they'll go to each other and say, don't play the Wildcat against me. I've got no defense for it. And also you try not to make the other team look stupid, right? So you're not going to run, bull rushes and blitzes every single one. You're going to mix up your stuff. There's a gentleman's agreement not to get people injured. But at the same time, you have defensive players who, haven't hit somebody properly for, whatever amount of months, because they obviously don't do that in training camp. So this is a way for the second, third, fourth stringers and even the first stringers, because preseason's bigger for the defense than it is the offense. And the person that it's even bigger again for is special teams. So, this performance is very important for Trey Smack, because it's like golf. He's out there basically on his own. Now there's that great Cam Acord session where he's talking about how Dan Whelan's supposed to hold the ball for him and what you do in wind and where you want it pointed and all that kind of stuff. But it basically comes down to, he's a new kicker. Can he do it under the lights? Can he do it in a performance and an atmosphere like he's going to face in Pittsburgh? It doesn't stand for anything, but for him it definitely does. He misses a field goal, he can't go, it's preseason. His operation will remain the same. We've had Mason Crosby on the podcast, and his operation remains the same. If it's a 55-yarder, if it's a 30-yarder, doesn't matter. Snap is the same, ball placement and hold is the same. The hash mark that he wants it on is preferable, and he takes X amount of steps back. He thinks a certain thing, does his pre-routine and goes and does it. And that's why you see rugby players, and again, I don't know if there's many that do it now. There are so many bobs that they do. They look up and down at the post a certain way, and it almost comes down to superstition as well as setup. But these guys have the process to keep following the process. So when they start missing kicks during the game, they don't freak out, they just do the process again. And in fact, it can get worse sometimes when they're trying to adjust for a wind that's coming from the right and kicking into the left so that the wind is pushed, all that kind of stuff. So this is all riding on Trey Smack. Then the defensive side of the ball, these lads want to get hits in, because they don't get a chance to do it. And in fact, when you look at the CBA and you look at the amount of time that Matt LaFleur has with these players in general, be it any facet, special teams, defense, offense, they don't have a lot of time with these guys anymore. What are practices? An hour and a half? We see sort of, this practice ended 1 hour and 12 minutes into whatever. It's very difficult now. I mean, you look out, so I'm reading Ray Nitschke's autobiography, and he talks about basically, back in the olden days, Vince Lombardi had these players and would drill into these players' processes and how, they have to be his brain on the field. You can't do that anymore. You don't have these players for long enough. So any time, any practice time that they have is extremely valuable, and any game time like this is extremely valuable to be able to assess and evaluate players. So each player and each coordinator and each position coach is going to be looking at, we called X play. Did you do your assignment? Yes, the third string quarterback went out there and, couldn't find anybody, wasn't going through his reads. That stuff's not really important. But did you go out as a wide receiver on the bubble? And did you run the correct depth on your route? Were you there at that time? Did you get off the line quickly? Did you, avoid the jam? Did you work back to the ball? I mean, they're looking and evaluating all of that stuff in person. Now, they'll put out the starters on offense, and this is always a controversial topic, particularly because Jordan Love went out in the preseason last season and got an injured throwing thumb, or non-throwing thumb, I should say. So again, it wasn't seen as massively impactful. It will impact you, of course, because he has to grip the ball with both hands and all that kind of jazz and hand the ball off. So it's not ideal, but I mean, it's damned if you do and damned if you don't. You still want to put the guys out there, more so than anything else. You want to go into a game-style atmosphere with everybody clued in. It sort of struck me when I watched the Man United Leeds friendly that was on in Ireland last night, and Bruno Fernandes missed the penalty at the very end, and he started laughing and smiling and went back, and they were kind of joking and stuff like that. That wouldn't happen in a competitive sense, right? And you're kind of like, well, of course, Steve, there is a difference between a friendly and a competitive game, but that's the type of mindset shift that I think Matt LaFleur talks about when he says, be prepared to play. I want you ready to play. And look, we see it in player attitudes. We saw it with David Bakhtiari when he, became a storied veteran. We saw it with Clay Matthews. These guys walk into the locker room and they can say and do what they like pretty much, because what are they going to do? Suspend them? So there's that attitude as well. And we've all seen it with co-workers, right? You have a guy who works there 20 years and he's going to go, this company can't fire me at this stage. So there's that nonchalance of that attitude. And that's obviously, venom for a coach. He wants you to go out and look prepared no matter how sort of storied and veteran style that you are. The other thing to look out for, because this is the thing we're going to see on offense, by the way, right? I mean, Jordan Love is not going to scramble. He's going to throw the ball into the dirt if he gets any pressure whatsoever. So all of that sort of stuff that we see, this sort of dynamism that we see being reported in training camp where he's using his legs more and getting out, none of that's going to happen. As well as that, I mean, Jonathan Gannon's new system is throwing up enough problems for this offense where they don't need to be tested by Pittsburgh in this game. They don't need to see certain looks and do certain things. They're going to go out and just run the vanilla offense, get used to the game under the lights, get used to just running that operation. It'd be more stuff like, can they get the play call in on time? Can they set properly? Can they limit penalties? Can they get everybody running the routes that they're supposed to run? It doesn't matter about the outcome. Now, do coaches look to win these games? Not particularly. But at the same time, if they do end up winning the game, well, then they look at it and go, well, our backups and we're a little bit further ahead than that other team are. But again, it's very hard to quantify, right? Because McCarthy might have his team in a mode to play a certain way and he's not really worried about the outcome, and he's okay if certain stuff falls down and isn't ready yet, because it isn't ready yet. They're still installing stuff properly and sort of, putting it into game time action. It's interesting to see what part Marshawn Lloyd has in this game, because with Josh Jacobs' uncertainty between legal matters and injury because he sat out of family night, Marshawn Lloyd might get a run out. Now, you don't want to run him out too much. You don't want to get him injured again. That's typically the type of, sort of shenanigans that happens on a preseason game, is that you run him out there to sort of blood him a little bit. He ends up getting injured, and then you're back to square one with him. So you obviously don't want that to happen. And then we want to see how the O-line gels. Do the starting offensive line get out there? There's some question marks over that between, players being injured, players not being ready. And then at cornerback, you typically leave your defense out a little bit longer because it's the first opportunity that they get to hit. Because at the end of the day, like I'm reading in the Vince Lombardi book with Ray Nitschke, it's all about the fundamentals. Sometimes it's not about, pre-read defense. It's not about off sort of schedule plays. It's, can you wrap up in a tackle and put him to ground? Can you do it in a clean way? Can you punch the ball out? Are you sort of diagnosing the play? Are you keeping the coverage tight to your wide receiver? Stuff like that. That's what they're going to be looking for in this game. It'll slowly descend into madness. I mean, as the game gets later and the sort of backups go and run out there. And I certainly don't think it's the same as the combine, right? They're not going to have a guy who's sort of like, he's a definite cut, goes out in preseason, plays lights out, and all of a sudden they keep him. I don't think that's the case. Preseason will just back up how ready they feel these players are before they go out. So they will be expecting Brandon Cisse, depending on how much he plays, to exhibit the same behaviour in that game than he does elsewhere. Because look, at the end of the day, are they going to sit down and watch the Pittsburgh Steelers and watch their tendencies and key in on it? No, they're already doing that for week one. So they're certainly not going to be doing it for preseason games. So in a way, this comes down to more raw talent, right? You're going to have cornerbacks and safeties out there seeing players that they've never saw for the first time. And that's the benefit as well of having second, third, fourth stringers out there, is that it really is an unknown. You don't know anything about this player's tendencies. You don't know that when he leans his head one way, he's going a certain way. None of that. You're just playing on instinct and you're playing on talent and you're just trying to do your assignment. So that's what this game is going to all be about. So the only thing that we really care is one, we don't pick up injuries, and if we do, they're not severe. And two, what does the special teams operation look like? What does Daniel Whelan look like when he gets back? Because Acrisure Stadium, formerly Heinz Field, the wind does be whipping up there. So are these special team units, are they back at their best? Is the stuff clean? Are they getting players on and off the field cleanly? Are plays coming in quickly? Is the huddle being broken up quickly? If they need to go down to 2-minute drill stuff, are they doing it? Are the wide receivers knowing what they're doing? And more so, all eyes on the defense, right? This is a new defensive scheme. This is a new special teams coordinator as well. Are those units working properly? Are the guys talking to each other? Mike Pettin many years ago spoke about it, is that when he sees players not being audible on the field, it's because they don't really know what they're doing. Right, you'd think it's the opposite way around. You think where, you'd be very audible, you're trying to figure out where you're going. Typically, all the players know where they should be, and they're shouting coverages and what they think the play is going to be beforehand and putting other lads into space or whatever. But when they're out there and they look confused, that's what we don't want to see. So this is our first sort of very vanilla look at our defense tackling and wrapping up, and does it look like they know what they're doing? And most of that comes down to urgency on the ball. Are they getting off the line quickly? Are they covering quickly? And stuff like that. And we get to see some of these new players, be them draft picks or, players that they brought in, like, Sky Moore. Do we see him a little bit more? Who's on returns? Do we see them? Because look, catching the ball from a height is catching the ball from a height. So let's see how that goes. So look, we can't read too much into it, but we will be able to pick out individual performances and sort of see, are they where they should be, bearing in mind at this point of pre-season. So that's it. That's the first quick snappage. A few housekeeping things. Titletown Track Team is our charity drive that is still ongoing. Again, the first step to that is get out and join the Strava group. Get into a couple of runs or hikes or walks or whatever. The community is really building up there on that app. So it's really great to see people talk to each other. Some people are not donating every week. They're donating once a month. Some people haven't donated yet because they're still feeling it out. Get in there and see how you feel. And the last thing to mention is the all expenses paid trip to Lambeau Field, which we fund, by the way. It's not given to us by the Packers. That is going out on Sunday. I haven't done the draw yet. The draw will be done at the weekend. There is still time to get in. So jump on that. It's incredible. We're flying over to Canada. We're going to Niagara Falls on the way. Then we're going to see the Detroit Lions away in Detroit, then flying over Lambeau Field via plane and landing in Green Bay and seeing the Thursday night game against the Panthers before we come home. And you get all of that absolutely free if you're a Patreon supporter. And again, you can get onto Patreon, and the same as Strava, and you can sort of feel it out and see if you like it. Patreon is a really good way for us to put out posts without you getting trapped under political posts or other nonsense that you see on X and Instagram and all that. It's a dedicated place that if you want to see what we put out, be it podcasts or, promo codes and all that kind of stuff, articles, you can see all of that stuff on our Patreon without having to sift through a timeline of other crap. So anyway, that's it. I'm at SteeDD NFL. We are the UK Packers. It's so good to be back with Kick Snaps, and we'll be back with a little sort of, sanity check after this preseason game to see where we're at and all the talking points. And touch wood, we don't have any injuries. But until then, speak to you then.